And we are live. Today is Thursday. I know I wasn't supposed to be on tonight, but I had a little scheduling mishap, so I am. I'm broadcasting from my house. I've been working on my book. It is done, and my part's done. It's over in editing where they edit all. Well, the paper edition editing is already done. It's not really editing; it's formatting. It needs to be formatted in a certain way for Kindle, like some other stuff. I don't know. I don't deal with any of that formatting stuff, but it's getting formatted right now for the digital conversion, and it'll be on sale soon, August 1st. If you go to crumpy.com/giants, I'm going to put that up, crumpy.com/giants. You can pre-order my book. All proceeds of my book will go to my niece who is suffering from cancer, which is not good. And you can order the paper edition later. That should be by Monday. It should be up for pre-orders on that. And the digital copy, of course, we want you to buy the digital copy because our cut is more, and that means more money for Bella, and that would make a world of difference. So it's crumpy.com/giants. You can go ahead and pre-order the book. If you have Prime, I think you get it for free or something like that, or Kindle Unlimited, and you can get it for free, which still helps me out. You can also donate to my Patreon at patreon.com/John Crump. Super Chats is open as well, and all the money goes to my niece. So it should be good. All right. Tonight I have someone who is a gunslinger and also a pastor. He's been following me on Twitter for a bit, and I wanted to have him on because he sends me some interesting stuff. So let me go ahead and bring him on. His name is Pastor Sam.
Hey, John. Doing? I'm well, praise the Lord.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're in Mexico, right? Right now?
That's right. I'm in the heart of the gunslingers territory where all the famous rebels were from, Pancho Villa and others in Chihuahua, Mexico, coming at you live.
Yeah. How is Chihuahua? I heard it's pretty dangerous down there.
You know, in the north, up against the border, it's pretty crazy. But here in the capital, it's actually pretty chill. It's a historical downtown. It's a city of 2 million people. So there's Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's, Starbucks, Walmart, and Home Depot if you want to feel like you're in Gringo land. But at the same time, you know, it's really a very Mexican flavor, and I really enjoy it here.
How did you end up in Mexico?
Well, I preached in Mexico for over 20 years on and off, and other Latin American countries. I've been to Central America. I've been to South America. But I came looking for a new base, and I didn't even know that this city was the heart of 3 different major revolutions. And so that I've really found my place in the world, at least to base from. I have to get out and hit the road and do events. There's going to be a lot of tent revivals this summer across the USA, so I'm intended to hit some of that. But as far as bringing Latin American affairs to the U.S. audience, as far as bringing in allies, because we are in World War, and a lot of people don't see the risk pieces on the board coming one after another into alignment with the USA, but we're getting a lot of allies, and so I report on that from right here in Mexico.
Yeah, Donald Trump is down there right now, right?
Donald Trump received yesterday the president of Mexico.
Oh, we see and other way around.
Yeah, in Washington. But that was a huge deal. And just to pack it into a nutshell, there's been a very deep divide between these 2 presidents. They call President Lopez Obrador AMLO by his 4 initials. And he ran on a socialist platform. He's a leftist president. He believes that government should solve a lot of problems. But here's the thing. A lot of leftist leaders are coming out and leaving behind the old ways, and they're draining their swamp. And so I'm extremely happy that there's a great deal of alliance and amity between him and Trump right now. It's a huge blessing and one that we didn't expect.
No, I didn't expect it either. It seems like leftist has always been a part of Latin America culture, whether it's Venezuela or Nicaragua back in the old days. Why do you think that is?
Nicaragua is still pretty leftist. They're part of the troika of tyranny. Yeah, well, John, a lot of it's our fault because of crony capitalism. I don't know how many listeners are familiar with the United Fruit Company and John Foster Dulles and Alan Dulles and the things that they did in Central America. But
Banana Republic, right?
That's right. That's what a banana republic is. Yes. So the United Fruit Company went in, around the turn of the century, late 1800s and early 1900s, and basically in Central America just set up their own governments, which appeared to be representative governments, free governments, but really they were completely controlled by the business interests. And so this is why capitalism is a dirty word. It's really difficult to explain to an American, to tell you the truth, because it has not been our experience that wealthy businessmen come into our homeland, rape the place, have totalitarian control because they came in with the money or with the capital.
Yeah, and they literally have their own armies.
Exactly. In fact, there's a saying, to have the epaulets of a banana republic generalissimo. So yeah, they built their own armies, and then they weren't really free armies. They weren't people that really loved their nation. And so this is where we get these tyrants that dress just absolutely ridiculously. I'm saying that with my most obnoxious of all my hats on. But these guys, they're tyrants. They're tyrants. And a lot of what has built that is American wealthy businessmen, Rockefeller interests. It really wasn't fair. And this, I'm jumping forward to the 1940s. It really wasn't fair for Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles. One was the head of the CIA, and the other one was the head of the Department of State. And so a lot of times the two of them would be working on the same country from completely opposite directions. One would be working with government and payouts and things like that, and the other one would be working with the cloak and dagger and espionage and assassinations. And so that's left a bad taste in the mouth of a lot of brown people. But here's the other thing, and I think that your audience will really jump on board with this. There's been Chinese communist-backed narco armies, anarchist armies in Central and South America throughout the whole Cold War, and even before that. This is why we had the Monroe Doctrine, so that European interests, globalist interests, would not be allowed to come into the Americas at any point and set up their a base of operations to attack us from.
Yeah, named after James Monroe.
That's right, a President Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
And this is early on in our time. This is in, I believe, 1832.
Yeah.
So one thing that we have in common with all of these nations is that they followed our lead in 1776. And as big of a propaganda divide as has been set up between especially white America and other races of United States American patriots, we can break that down. We have in common 1776. They saw what we did. It had never been done before. Throwing out the Europeans. It had never been done. And after 300 years of domination by the Hispano-Portuguese, really the Pope, 300 years of domination by globalist European interests, they saw what we did. Because there's educated people, even back in those days in Latin America, people that have been to New Orleans, Nueva Orleans, or Nueva York, or Washington, or studied in Europe, studied in Paris, and they started to get this crazy idea. Hey, we could do this. We could throw the Spanish out after 300 years. And so it started. And the city where I am is one of the great cities where Mexican independence was declared in 1810. And then, it took some fighting. So when you get around to 1832, pretty much all the independence movements were complete by then. The Spanish had been thrown out, and the Portuguese had been thrown out, all the European powers, and the popes that were behind them. The Jesuit order has been outlawed in over 50 nations for being a surreptitious militant organization that overthrows nations. And so President Monroe said, all right, here's the deal. Any European or globalist interest that wants to come to the Americas at all, you're going to have to tangle with the US of A. So people think that's outdated, but it's absolutely the way that it should be. We've been far too patient in allowing European globalist interests and even our own globalist interests out of the Rockefeller family and, this crony capitalism to set up shop in Latin America. All of it's turning around.
That's interesting. What a lot of people don't realize is the United Fruit Company, which is now known as Chiquita, did that in Latin America, but Coca-Cola also did that in Venezuela back in the day.
Boom, chicky, boom, boom.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a really weird, interesting time down there. If you learn about the whole Latin America experience and stuff like that, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. So let's get into something. You are the gospel gunslinger. Why do you call yourself that?
Well, I'm the founder of the Gospel Gunslingers, me and George Washington. Really, it's not a new idea. I've preached gospel for a lot of years, John, but I'm also a black belt. And, a hunter, and believe in self-defense and self-government. And these doctrines came from the Bible. The Mexicans didn't just cook this up. And our tricorn wearing forefathers in the United States didn't just cook it up. Our forefathers read into the Bible. They developed their own uniquely American doctrines of self-defense and self-government. So these ideas come from the Bible. Now remember, we're coming out of dark ages. Other than very small nations, like Israel was a very small nation that we read about in the Bible, but other than very small pockets, for thousands of years, no nation really dared to govern itself. If you look at the dark ages of Europe, that was a 1,000-year time span where no nation was really free, where kings of the earth were appointed. It was a cesspool, royal offices like dukeships and clergy offices too. Bishoprics were purchased. It was all based on bribery. It was all around the Catholic Church, which I see as false Christianity and the enemy of us as Americans and as free believers. And so it's something that came about here in America. The Mayflower Compact is a really, really big deal. Those were Puritan. Only 19 of the Puritan men were on the Mayflower, and only half of them brought their families. And the rest of the people were women, children, contractors, and seamen. So there were only 19 of these Puritan men. But before they got off of the ship, they wrote the Mayflower Compact, and that's really the dawn of self-government. From the Mayflower Compact, then we move in, and that's a foundational document for our own Declaration of Independence 150 plus years later, and our Constitution. So what I do is I go back and I study what our forefathers believed, and we just read the Bible different. So often, John, the Bible has been used to control people. I don't know if you a really good example is the Book of Eli, old Denzel Washington's movie that he made, where everybody's looking. Are you a fan?
Oh, I love that movie. It was a good movie. I'm gonna spoil it, so if you haven't seen Book of Eli, I'm about to spoil it. When you find out that he's blind, it was just bam. It was just like that revelation. It was like you're a badass of the whole movie. Then you find out, yeah, he's blind, and then you find out that he was being protected.
Yes. And other people in that film are using the Bible. They're all on the hunt for the Bible so that they can use it to control other people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the printing press is what brought us out of the dark ages.
Yep,
the printing press,
Gutenberg.
and the first book that was printed was the Bible.
Yeah, Martin Luther had it printed.
And other heroes of the faith, many of whom laid down their life for their belief that, regular kids like you and me should have access to it. So, we talk about, John, that we should all be armed. But underneath of that is this other belief that we all should have access to the Word of God. So I got my Bible right here. We believe that we should all have access to the Word of God to be able to learn righteousness and wisdom and to know God and to not be spoon-fed doctrines of men, which invariably are used for tyrannical purposes. So I just go back and study those doctrines. I've taught on them a great deal. I've got over 90 lessons, verse of the day for gospel gunslingers, and they're all 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-minute lessons. I try to stick to 5 minutes on my ones that I'm doing now, and every one is a passage from the Bible. And you can't listen to very many of those without even somebody who's spent a lot of time in church. Somebody who's spent a lot of time in church comes to the realization that they've been taught not the whole counsel of the Word. And somebody that hasn't spent a lot of time in the Bible, they think, maybe this is really worth my while to look into. And it is. It's just, it takes some true grit. A guy's got to be a warrior to really get in there, because you open that book, it'll cut you. Wherever Matt, you crack it open to. Go ahead.
Matt wants to know, can you explain the Mayflower Compact and how that was like the basis for the Constitution a little bit?
I'm just going to hit that in generalities. It's something that really merits study. A lot of people look back at the Magna Carta in England in the 1200s, which limited royal power. And without discounting that, I just want to make a new point that our uniquely American documents are a lot stronger, and that the Mayflower Compact was a huge quantum leap in people reading the Bible and seeing in it that they should govern themselves, that they have a right to defend themselves. Back in Europe and all that, like just one tyrannical law, prima nocta. The nobles took a young bride, came and expected to grab that bride and take her to bed with them. First night, prima nocta. This was law. See, we just see jokes about it today. Iron Man's talking to Thor about taking over the kingdom and blah, blah, blah. And he says, if I become king, I'm bringing back prima nocta. I'm going to sleep with all the young maidens, before they're allowed to be married. So that's the kind of tyranny that was in the old world and is today. It's just got another face on it. I really pity the French putting on their yellow vests and going out in the street and trying to make a difference. They're in the land of Soylent Green. They got no guns. They got no weapons. They've never really been free. It's kind of a lost cause. And I'm thankful that we're getting some allies around the world, but I really want to bring a message to America that, look, there is the Americas, the new world, and then there's the old world, which is like, there's a reason our parents, our forefathers fled away from that. So, yeah, look at the Mayflower Compact and take a peek at it. There are really two experiments in the Americas. There is the conquest of 1492, Christopher Columbus. They came into Mexico, raped and pillaged their way across. They used sex and rape as a weapon to confuse the further generations. Pretty soon, there were kids being born that were sired by European conquerors. And then you have the Mayflower experiment, which was a lot later, 128 years later. In 1620, they landed, and within 1 year, they had made treaties with 50 indigenous tribes. They made treaties with them. God opened the way for them to communicate with those tribes. And then it was the tribes that violated those treaties that either wound up warring with other tribes and were exterminated, or plagues came on them and they were exterminated. We've been taught a very revisionist history to conceal a very simple fact that there are two experiments in the Americas, and all the wealth and power, all of Wall Street, all the skyscrapers of New York, all our technology, all our nuclear weapons, all our aircraft carriers and boomer submarines in the seas, it all goes back to the Mayflower Compact and what those 19 men believed, that God would help them and protect them. On my site, I've got a playlist. If just go to my YouTube, I'm in the comments at the very top, or you can search Gospel Gunslingers, and there's a playlist called Good Preaching. And there's a lesson on there where I just break down the Bible for an hour about the United States and Britain and the whole idea of Protestant nations, and that this is in the Bible. It's really irrevocable. It's irrefutable. But I would invite you to take a look and learn where we really came from, because everybody's lying today. Everybody's lying and saying that we were the ones that raped our way and mistreated all the Indians, and really that's a bunch of bull. It's not the truth, John.
Besides a broken knee. That was pretty bad.
Well, there's always going to be in war one or two atrocities, but here's the thing. Don't forget about the Louisiana Purchase. France controlled all of Canada, and from New Orleans diagonally over to, I don't know, maybe Sacramento, from there north. So all of Montana, the Dakotas, and all the way until 1803, they controlled that. And Mexico controlled the Southwest. Well, really, the Spanish controlled the Southwest. And so we got those western states in two chunks, and they were largely desolate. Texas is kind of the exception, because Texas itself was a nation and then decided to become a state. And many people in Texas themselves wanted to declare independence in the age that American nations were declaring independence. And so here again, it's really not fair to point at Whitey. If you want to talk about atrocities, here's who did it. The papist armies. The Spanish and the Portuguese, and then later the French, waged military campaigns one after another to crush these nations. And earlier than our independence were the French and Indian Wars, where the papist French came in from Canada and got all these different Indian tribes riled up to attack English colonists. It's not even really fair to call the 13 colonies, because a colony is named after Cristobal Colon, which is Christopher Columbus, and he was a papist conqueror. And that's not what happened at any point in the Americas, other than maybe one or two places in Florida and in the South where those armies came through.
Trial of Tears is pretty bad as well.
I missed that, John.
Trial of Tears. Oh, no,
Trail of Tears.
Trail of Tears, not Trial of Tears. I have no idea.
I'm not going to go through every occurrence, but no. I will tell you that any massacre that you want to look at in the United States is orders of magnitude smaller than the conquest of the Americas. I left from Santiago de Chile.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that at all. I'm just saying that we have to remember that bad stuff happens on both sides. So I'm not for pretending like, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I'm not for pretending like there was not any atrocities. I think that we have to acknowledge the atrocities and also the good stuff and put them on a scale and weigh them, if that makes any sense. So both sides are going to do atrocities. There's going to be good and bad. There's not going to be, besides God, there's not going to be one all good person besides God.
War is hell. War is hell.
Basically what I'm saying. So, I just don't want to pretend like there wasn't atrocities on one side. There was atrocities on both sides. You weigh them out of which side had more atrocities, I guess you can say, and more bad stuff. It's the way I look at it. Oh, it's not black and white. It's a shade of gray with everything.
I would encourage everyone to begin to think of the Americas as two completely different experiments that are very much diametrically opposed. And, we have a lot of revisionist history to fight. I think we can agree on that point.
Yeah, we can definitely agree on that point.
The way to come away from it is to go back to the benchmark, who believed in self-government and who started it. And those doctrines come from the Bible. And so that's what I teach on, John. For so long, self-defense has just been a dirty word. I'm really glad, and you've been a big part of this movement of bringing back the U.S. of A. to an armed society. For me as a kid growing up in the 80s, and I mean, out in flyover country, it still was unacceptable to be a shooter and a hunter and to take up those habits. The Boy Scouts of America was being taken over at that time, and it wasn't even then what it used to be. And it's people like you that have brought America back to being a pistol packing society.
Well, I mean, I try. I highlight stuff. I do a lot of activism and stuff like that. I just believe that an armed society is a polite society, and we forget the reason. We forget the reason why we are armed. We're not armed to go hunt a bear. We're not armed to go hunt a deer. We're not armed even for the guy that might break into our house. I mean, those are reasons why you might be armed, but that's not the reason why our forefathers wanted us armed. They wanted us armed to be able to stand up against tyranny. In case the government turns tyrannical, they wanted the people to have the tools to throw off those chains.
Yeah, and I'll even go a little bit further. They wanted us to be armed because all governments, according to the Declaration of Independence, derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. I'm really hoping to have a revival amongst law enforcement where they remember that, because a lot of them see themselves in the European sense of police. They see themselves in as a type of royalty, as a type of upper class. And they need to remember that without the support of their neighbors, they're vastly outnumbered. And our strategy of policing has created a lot of problems that we as a nation have to face, people that don't share our values. And so I really hope to bridge the gap between that thin blue line and the public from whence they derive their just powers. And I feel like as far as being an armed citizen, our thought needs to not be on overthrowing a tyrannical government, but keeping the ship stable, keeping it stable by being where the buck stops. We should have so many armed citizens that crooks just don't live very long. And America used to be that way.
Yeah. There's sheriffs out there. Chris Brown, for example, he's one of the subjects of my new book that's coming out on August 1st, which anyone out there can go pre-order at. It's going to be exclusive Amazon Kindle for ebook, and it's going to go in it's going to go into bookstores and everything else.
You want to give us a teaser?
Well, it's at crypto.com/giants. I talked to 25 different people. It's those interviews put into over the last 3 years. It's interviews with people like Jason David Frank, he used to be a Power Ranger. He was the Red Ranger. Chris Brown, who was sheriff. Cheryl Todd, exclusive interview, which you've never seen before, in there. Senator Cindy Hyde Smith, Tim Kennedy from Hunting Hitler on History Channel. You have musicians in there. It's just all over the place. I like talking.
That sounds like a blast.
I like getting what they think, and getting their opinions on stuff. Michael Sadini from Walk the Talk America, which is a mental health organization. I talked to him in there. Just all over. Cody Wilson, the capitalist, the anarcho-capitalist, the guy who first 3D printed a gun. That's in there. He's in there as well. So it's kind of cool. It's my conversations with them.
That sounds like fun. You brought up Nazi hunting. A lot of Nazis hid out in Latin America when the Third Reich was falling.
Yeah, Tim Kennedy, his whole show was about looking into that and Latin America, and I talked to him about that. And a very interesting thing about that is they went to a town down in, I can't remember where it was.
Argentina, probably.
No, I don't. I think it was in Chile, actually. It was like everyone they were originally in Argentina, then the whole town moved to Chile, and it's still there. It's like a gated community, and in the town, everyone speaks German, and everyone is Aryan.
There are some places like that.
Yeah, the dental mix, which is kind of weird that you had this like German colony in the middle of Chile.
Right. Perón was good friends with Hitler himself, and so he started this political movement called Peronism, and the Peronists are back in charge today in Argentina. So they're causing some problems, but the people aren't really happy with it. We may get Argentina back. We might have to fight Argentina. A lot of there's great. Not only does Central and South America have expansive land masses and beautiful mountains, way higher than the Rockies, and volcanoes and jungles and rivers and tremendous natural beauty and resources. It's also of great strategic importance. We need to defend the hemisphere if we're going to continue to be a free nation in the United States of America. And so sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that and to see all the wars as being in the sandbox and so forth. But when it comes to global conflict, we have to stand together as a continent. And that's why it's such a problem that we have a few tyrannical regimes that are non-democratic. There's only a few, but boy, they're causing a lot of problems and a lot of suffering.
Yeah,
we need to get rid of them.
The Venezuela comes to mind. We have family friends who are they still own property in Venezuela, but they might own property in Venezuela, I should say.
Right.
They can't go back and check to make sure it's still there.
Yeah, as if that deed is worth anything, right?
Yeah, so they said they miss it, but they don't think that they're ever going to be able to see it again with the people that are in government. One of the reasons why they left is because they own a company, and that company got taken over, and they left because.
Right.
They just don't when they take over your company there, they don't exactly they fire you, but they really fire you. If you know what I mean.
Yes, and part of what government is instituted to do is to protect private property. And so once that ceases to be the case, it's not a free government anymore. I mean, aside from some trust busting and stuff like that. So there's a lot of sad stories like that. There's a lot of, we're to the point where Venezuela, with Russian Chinese backing and Cuban intelligence, has been able to send 1 million refugees each to go agitate the free governments in the region. And that's what we saw before we started having riots. I reported on all of that as it was happening. It's all on my blog, subscribestar.com/gospel gunslingers. And as the riots are happening in Ecuador, Peru, Chile, I break it all down. Who's on this side, who's on that side, what the news reports say, what you're not going to hear in the news. And then there's a warning that comes along with that, hey, this is coming to America if we don't take some very severe steps and some aggressive steps. As somebody who's really studied self-defense, there's a point where you have to take the battle back to the aggressor. And we didn't do that. And so lo and behold, it has come here. And now we have our own statues being toppled. Our heroes, even other heroes of free governments, like in Miami, where there's a large Venezuelan community, the statue of Simón Bolívar was damaged. And the Venezuelan people went out and cleaned it to the best of their ability. And they said, do you even know who this is? This is the George Washington of South America. This is our hero that led the revolutions against our European oppressors. And he's a hero to us and a hero to free people everywhere. So, this is where our history is shared. And it's just sad that there's so much ignorance right now. And that's why I go in and teach on the Bible doctrines. I go right into the Proverbs, to the teachings of Jesus, to Jesus commanding us to bear the sword, how all that broke down, how things are taught wrong, and conclusions are taught as immutable fact, and they're conclusions that really the whole counsel of the Word of God does not support, does not sustain. And really a lot of guys that are on our side, John, guys we see at the range and guys that we like and pistol packing mamas, when it comes to them defending their ideals, we find that they have a weak foundation of the rudiments of the Bible. And so that's why I've gone right in and made a point to just teach a daily lesson on the foundational doctrines of our forefathers and how they read the Bible and what the whole counsel of it really is.
Yeah. Right now, I just want to just plug a couple things really quick. As you might know, everyone out there, my niece has cancer. My book, which is available at crumpy.com/giants for pre-order. All the money for that will go to my niece. Also, super chats. All super chats goes to my niece. And all my Patreons, patreon.com/John Crump. That all goes to my niece as well. And if you go to crumpy.com well, I'll throw it up here. I forgot to write it. It's crumpy.com/GFM, and that will take you to their GoFundMe, where they're raising money. They have about $50,000 in medical bills. So sometimes, yeah, it's tough. So I'm doing everything possible to help them out, and I'm asking anyone out there that can help out. You help me out, Sam. I appreciate that. With that, through Subscribestar, which is great, and I really appreciate that.
I got my patch too. I got my Pirates patch. I'm looking forward to flying that. Maybe we'll put it right on there. Put it right on my sleeve.
Yeah. So
no quarter for tyrants.
Yeah. Tell us about gun laws in Mexico.
Okay. There's a constitutional provision that people have a right to retain firearms, to own firearms, and to keep them in their home for their own defense. But here's the thing. There's been progressive, not only leftist, but crony governments. Mao Zedong came to Mexico in around 1960, more or less. I've got the pictures of him coming and visiting with the Mexican president at that time. And so there's always been a very strong effort to get Mexico away from being the revolutionaries and the gunslingers that they are, that's in their blood. You know, I got Pancho Villa right on here. By the way, Pancho Villa was a great general. A number of world-class trained generals came to him and bowed the knee. We are taught that he was just a gangster. You know, Jesse James at the top of his game maybe had 24 men in his gang, and Pancho Villa led the greatest cavalry army that's ever been assembled on the Americas, and probably the greatest firearms wielding cavalry army ever. And so they've fought 3 bloody revolutions to have any degree of self-government and of freedom, and we really should get along very well because of that. But you know, in U.S. cinema and U.S. history, a few sore spots are brought forth, and then that's about it. And we don't really discover how much we have in common. So their right to keep and bear arms has been eroded in our modern era. It's not what it should be. You know, there's some restrictions on calibers and things like that. They're not supposed to have military calibers or so forth. But there's a growing movement towards auto defenses, self-defense, and communities arming themselves to drive out cartels. And I can't say that it's all gone well with that, because sometimes government entities will come in and want to take that over. Sometimes cartel entities will come in and make a new cartel out of the civil defense force. Both of those have happened, and of course that's not the right end that we want from that. But there's a growing movement in Mexico, and even this president, Lopez Obrador, has spoken about that we should have, that in Mexico there should be a right to keep and bear arms. Really, the biggest spokesperson for a right to keep and bear arms is the Brazilian president. Those are the second cousins. You know, they speak Portuguese. They don't speak Spanish like all the other nations. But that president is a tremendous conservative president. I've prayed for him that he would get in. You know, he was subject to an assassination attempt, which hurt him very bad. He still wears a colostomy bag from that, because the tyrannical types, they didn't want a gunslinger like him to be president. He was a paratrooper and an infantry captain in his military service. He fought tyrants in his own nation in his military service. And so he really is the tropical Trump, and in some ways is even more extreme than Trump. I mean, he's a two-fisted gunslinger, you know. Trump is really very diplomatic. And so Jair Bolsonaro in some ways is more extreme. I think you would like him better in some respects, but he's really pushing for popular ownership of firearms to be very widespread in Brazil, and that's the solution to really get the gang violence and tyranny completely and forever under control. Of course, you know that Brazil is a big arms manufacturing company. Taurus is there, Llama's there, and so that's in their blood too, is making guns.
Yeah, I used to. Well, actually, I talked to. Funny thing is, Llama and Taurus. I talked to the former owner today of those companies. He was one of my pre-orders on my book. He sent me a message saying he pre-ordered my book. Oh, if it's good enough for him, great. It's good enough for you guys out there.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people think that if you don't have $1,000 Sig Sauer, then you can't defend yourself. But I'll tell you what, bang for bang and buck for buck, you get a pretty good deal out of South America. So anybody who's in the entry-level market for a firearm that they want to be able to trust with their life, and they don't have tons and tons of money, think about going Brazilian.
Yeah, it originally was they were both owned by the same guy though.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Brazilians. They make also Rossi, comes from Brazil,
right?
As well. So yeah, there's a lot of gun companies in Brazil.
You know, if you want a 1911, you're looking to spend. It's hard to get one for $1,000, and really $1,500 is kind of typical. But you can buy a clone from out of South America that'll be reliable, and you get all the technology that served us well in numerous wars, and for a lot less money.
Yeah, I'm big. I'm big into the German and the Austrian, and not
Well,
because I was speaking German in the chat. I love HK firearms.
Hey, I like HK. I like SIG. You know, here in Mexico, I've got German steel in my own kitchen, and there's no discounting German engineering and their weapon craft, but you got to pay for it. You do. Germany and Austria, you got to pay.
Yeah, Glocks are pretty reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
But you get like a gun that, like, my carry piece is a Glock. I carry a Glock 19 or a Glock 43. Those are my two carry pieces. I either have one of those or that, and I mean, I trust my life with Glocks because they're freaking indestructible and they're reasonably priced too. And CZ, that's another good one that from the Czech Republic. CZ. My bedside gun is a CZ Scorpion SBR suppressed.
I've run CZs for years, and a lot of the older CZs. You know, CZ has kind of got into the first rate market, and they're part of the Western world now. But back when they were part of the Warsaw Pact, they were like the Brazilian manufacturers that we're talking about. They gave a lot of money. They gave you a lot for your money. And I've got a lot of saddle time with CZ82 and CZ52, and I got a lot of good things to say about them. You know, that CZ82, there was nothing like it until you get into the late 90s, and there were specific purpose-built CCW firearms, which, you know, John, you and others really had a lot to do, and I was part of that movement too. You know, I got my discretionary concealed carry permit when I was 21 years old, and nobody had permits to carry. I really had to jump over a lot of obstacles and suffer a lot of reproach for being part of that culture that they thought was dinosaurs. You know, the people that carried guns were Korean War veterans that had never reformed themselves to civilized society. Yes, I'm also a fan of the CZ75, and you know, you're a gun show, so we could just talk a little shop on here, right?
Oh yeah.
The CZ75 has the best of both worlds, and the 82. You can run it cocked and locked, or you can run it hammered down on a live round with a double action first shot, like the Beretta. But see, the Beretta doesn't give you that single action cocked and locked first shot and you know, a light single action trigger pull. And so in my experience, it's really the best of both worlds. And with the CZ75, they started running chopped CZ75. So there's a lot of variants that were purpose-built concealed carry, sawed off, you know, service autos. And this was before it was cool. You know, in the mid 90s to the late 90s, the game began of having purpose-built. So now we got like the Hellcat, right? Mm-hmm. Awesome. You got a rocket in your pocket, right? What, 13 rounds of 9mm plus P, and then, you know, full-size mags and extended mags for your reserve. But I came out of the era where guys were carrying C Camp 32s because it was either that or their 1911 government model. And even if you go into the chopped government models, you know, they're still huge and clunky and blocky compared to, no offense, compared to purpose-built CCW firearms. But the one manufacturer that was always ahead of the game was CZ. And boy, if you could say the actual name that CZ is short for, I'll send you my crumpy patch because I think it's impronounceable. But yeah, the CZ75 and the CZ82. The 82 has slim lines. It came in 9mm Kurtz, you know, a 380, or there was another option. You could get it in 9x18, and I've carried 9x18 CZ82s just all over, and surprised a lot of people that that I had a concealed double stack military issue sidearm concealed in a lot of situations. So I've had a lot of fun with that, and man, blazing fast, blazing fast. Just thumb sweep that thumb safety, and click, click, click. So that's something I've really liked. And of course, the old ones, have that Tokarov cartridge, and now there are some competitors for that. But here again, having something that fast in a handgun just wasn't done really until 5.7 millimeter came out, and then that changed the game. But I've had a lot of fun with CZ over the years.
Yeah, you mean people can't say Seska Vobrovjovka?
Exactly.
You didn't think I was going to pull that one, did you?
You're the man. You're the gun guru.
I'm not the guru. I just know a little bit about guns here. Yeah, I love gun history. And I love everything about guns. In fact, if we get disconnected, guys, sorry, but I made this today. I'm gonna hold it this way, so YouTube algorithm doesn't pick it up.
Right.
Cody Wilson sent me a Ghost Gunner 2. Ghost Gunner 3. I had it 2. And I got my Ghost Gunner 3 yesterday, so I had to go ahead and make a lower. And the Ghost Gunner 2. Are you familiar with that at all? Ghost Gunner 2 and 3?
I'm not familiar with the different iterations of it, but I'm a big fan of building your own.
Yeah, basically,
rolling your own.
It's a CNC machine. You stick the non-complete lower, the blank in there,
right?
And it just does everything for you.
That's cool.
The Ghost Gunner 2 felt like a work in progress, a prototype, and that's basically what it was. The Ghost Gunner 3 feels like a complete product, and it's about 300% faster. So
fantastic.
So it's going to be released fourth quarter, and it's going to sell for $2,100. But you can make AR-15 lowers. You can make 1911s. You can make Glocks, Glock-based firearms too. So it's like an anti-gun control thing,
Yeah, buddy. Rolling your own is part of our own history, and some of my martial arts history goes back to people that made their own weapons for centuries, and so I'm a strong believer in that, and it's part of our rights. And we have to really be aware of it, because I'm going to tell you something. These anarchists and these nihilists, these troublemakers that want to tear America down, they study techniques of sabotage. They study how, and the next phase that's coming, I'll just tell you, there's going to be explosives involved, and we're not going to be playing with bottle rockets. They're going to use explosives in a distractionary fashion, and in an attack fashion, and in a sabotage fashion. It's coming, and you as Americans need to be ready for that. Another thing that I teach on is not just the reasons from the Bible why we can and should be warriors and defend ourselves and our families, but also how to get the help of God, and how the greats of the Bible won the battles that they were in, because this is what the Bible is. It's a manual for how to get out of horrific scrapes with your own hide most of the time. Dying a martyr is one thing, but that's really the rarity in the Bible. The Bible's full of people who were victorious and then entered into golden ages, something that we might just be able to do one more time if we really, really keep our game tight.
Yeah, there is a dying a martyr thing. There is a quote from Patton. I don't know if you heard it or not, but he was giving a speech to his men, and he goes, "You guys are willing to die for your country, but I don't want you to die for your country. I want you to make that son of a bitch over there die for his."
That's the plan.
Yeah,
That's the plan.
Yeah, it's a great quote. You know, there was a great speech when he just like pointed out, like, "No, you don't want to do that. Make him do it."
We have to be schooled and studied and confident in our doctrine of extermination, in our doctrine of execution. And everybody knows that the Bible has executions in it, but we are, in Mexico, law students read the law of Moses, understanding that it is the foundation of Western law. And so a lot of people, John, they don't have the will to pull the trigger. And this is one of the things that we learn from the Bible, the why and the how. And I would just really encourage people to get into that.
One more thing I want to find out. How did you find me online, by the way?
I came across I don't know, I bump into you really a lot online. I had told you that before we came online. But you're really out there. You are active, and you're not ashamed. A lot of people soft pedal, they pussyfoot. They're not sure about what they believe and where they stand. And you're just out there. Hey, this is me, and this is where we are, and this is the narrative I'm putting forward.
Yeah, I don't care if people don't like me. Somebody once told me, well, if one time I said, yeah, there's some people who really don't like me. They're like, well, if life isn't worth living if everyone likes you. You don't know how
that's a fact.
You don't know
You're
how
to make some enemies.
Yeah, you don't know how successful you are by how many people like you. You know how successful you are by how many people don't like you. It's kind of true. Somebody just named that.
I love it in old Robert Redford as the Jeremiah Johnson, the mountain man. They talk about, in those times a man was judged by his enemies. And of course, the old mountain man had the mightiest Indian warriors were gunning for him, trying to sneak up on him all the time. So yeah, we've made some enemies.
Yeah. You follow me on Twitter. My Twitter is kind of different from a lot of my other social media. If you guys don't follow me on Twitter, I'm over there at Crumpy SS. I'm more political on Twitter. I'm like on my Instagram, I'm solely focused on gun stuff and stuff like that. But on Twitter, I'm all over the place, getting into arguments, getting into fights.
It's kind of what it's for, right? Put yourself out there.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be out teaching openly and telling some war stories of my many, many years in the trenches as a persecuted minority and as the Lord's ambassador to a lot of places where, like you say, we weren't really wanted and weren't well received. Places that were controlled by darkness. We're coming to the shocking realization of how much evil is all around us, and especially in positions of power. Let me just read a verse here. I'm open to Proverbs. This is chapter 13. This is verse 14. The law of the wise is a fountain of life, to depart from the snares of death. So the snares of death are out there, and a lot of them are ideological. It doesn't really have to do with the use of our shooting iron, but at the same time, it's the word of God that gets us out of those, to depart from the snares of death. Part of the wisdom of God is to be prepared for the dark day, right? Where we depart from the snares of death by blasting our way out.
Thank you for that. All right. Anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
Just want to invite everybody to come along. We have to get back to our foundational roots. We live in a nation where everybody thinks they're Christians. Everybody thinks that they are the good guys, and a lot of people who think that if they died today, they would be left out of the holy city. They would be out with the dogs in outer darkness and in gnashing of teeth. And I would really encourage people to make peace with God, to bow the knee. I would encourage you, John. There's some illness in your family. One of the things that I teach on, it was faith preachers and it was healing evangelists that were my heroes. And those things are coming back. This is another thing, a beautiful part of our history as Americans is the great revivals and the great healings that have followed us. One of my heroes is William Branham. And, he prayed for a lot of people in the name of Jesus that were miraculously healed. But one of them was Congressman Willie Upshaw. Congressman Upshaw had a severed spine and spent 60 years in a wheelchair until he went to the William Branham meeting, and he was supernaturally healed, and he walked for the rest of his days. He was a United States congressman in Washington, D.C., and I would encourage, if there are any sick among you, you look for the tent revivals that are coming this summer. Don't wait. You go find where there's going to be a full gospel preaching tent set up. My friend Torben Sondergaard, who's a refugee in this country, being thrown out of his own country for healing the sick and casting out devils, he's going to be setting up tents all across the USA with numerous people that move in the miraculous and in gifts of healings. And you know what? We need a few good gunslingers to be at those events wherever they happen, because there's a new level of opposition. And when we get out and preach the full gospel, that's a place that violence can certainly erupt. So please go look for that. His website is thelastreformation.com, and follow some sound Bible teachings. He started a school called the Pioneer School. The Spirit of the Lord spoke that to him. He didn't even know what a pioneer was. He had to look it up in his dictionary. Well, guess what? He's in the land of pioneers now, and having been thrown out of his country, he's learning a little bit about being a pioneer and suffering reproach for the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. But let's all turn our nation back to the Lord Jesus Christ so that we can be found in him when the dark day comes, when the battle comes, and when imminent warfare engulfs our land, as many souls will be swept into eternity. And I would like as many Americans as possible to be found, in their names to be found in the book of life, and them to enter into the holy city of the New Jerusalem.
All right. Thank you so much for that.
And you asked me to plug. I'm very easy to find. Just look up Gospel Gunslingers on any engine. I have a Twitter. I have a YouTube. I'm easy to find in Mexico. The quarantines are breaking, and I'm going to be out at some tent revivals. And I really encourage people. I don't have a lot of friends, John. I encourage people to come along and to be partners. I'm an easy person to reach out to and to get to know. And I'm looking for those who want to come along. So I just extend that invitation. A lot of your listeners out there, think about being a gospel gunslinger. Think about whether you are. These are two words that people think don't go together, because they've either been taught half the gospel that doesn't involve use of force or violence, or they're a gunslinger that thinks that the Bible teaches that they're the bad guy. So we're going to put the two together and find that all of our forefathers and our heroes in this nation and in the Bible, they were gospel gunslingers, and we should be too.
All right. Thank you so much. The first thing I want to plug is Gorillas and Guns. He told me to plug him, so I am plugging him. Here is his YouTube right here. Gorillas and Guns. Search him out. He's a great guy. Fellow Virginian, too. So he's in the fight against Northam with me. He's helped out GOA. He's a GOA supporter as well. Second thing I want to plug is GOA. I'm going to leave his Gorilla and Guns up for this. And you can join GOA for 25% off by going to gunowners.org/black-swan-media. 25% off. That's great. Check out my book. Go to crumpy.com/giants. You can pre-order the digital copy, and the print copy is going to be out soon, but I encourage you to order the digital copy because it gives more money to my niece Bella, who is suffering from cancer. You can always visit the GoFundMe at crumpy.com/GFM for GoFundMe. And I got my Patreon. You can also give me super chats, by the way. You can go to my Patreon. I'm almost done here, guys. Patreon.com/John Crump. Follow me on social media at Real John Crump. Crumpy on Parler, which is the newest social media platform out there, or Crumpy SS on Twitter. That is it for me tonight. And that is it. And I will see you next week. Next week we have a very special guest, Ren vs. DC, which is why you can carry a handgun in DC. I will be having the man himself on. And also, I might be doing an old reunion show with my old Patriot News podcast people, but I'm not sure about that yet. But I'll be back next week. Probably only going to do 1 or 2 shows next week. And the week after that, I'm not going to be on at all. I'm going up to New York. Hopefully I don't get the Rona. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. And Pastor Sam, thank you as well. And with that, I am going to say, drop the video.